There is a strange kind of grief that no one teaches you how to name. It is not the loss of a person, not the end of a relationship, not even the death of a dream. It is something far more intimate. It is the quiet, almost invisible death of who you used to be. You may have felt it recently, a sense that the person you were last year, last month, even last week, no longer exists. Not because something dramatic happened, but because something inside you simply stopped. Stopped pretending, stopped holding on, stopped believing in the version of yourself you spent years constructing. If you are seeing this video at this exact moment, it is not an accident. Carl Jung believed that when a person is ready to understand something, life arranges itself to deliver the message. And the message you are receiving right now is this: your old self has already died. You are not losing yourself, you are meeting yourself. Perhaps for the very first time. Jung called this process ego death, one of the most misunderstood and most sacred experiences a human being can go through. Most people fear it, most people run from it. But you are still here. And that alone tells me something important about where you are in your journey. The ego is not your true self. It is the self you built. The collection of beliefs, roles, identities, and stories you accumulated over years of living. It is the voice that says, I am successful or I am a failure. It is the image you protect in social situations. The person you describe when someone asks, tell me about yourself. Think about all the ways you identify yourself. Your profession, your relationships, your achievements, your opinions, your personality traits. All of this is ego. All of this is constructed. Layer upon layer of identity built up since childhood, shaped by what your parents praised, what your teachers rewarded, what your peers accepted. Jung understood that the ego serves an essential purpose. It helps you navigate the world, make decisions, maintain relationships. Without some sense of ego, you could not function as an individual. You would have no center of gravity. But he also understood something most people never realize until life forces them to confront it. The ego is not permanent. It is not meant to last forever unchanged. At certain points in life, the psyche naturally outgrows the ego the same way a snake outgrows its skin. The container that once protected you becomes the prison that confines you. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become who you truly are, you must first release who you only pretended to be. Ego death is this release. It is the moment when the carefully constructed identity begins to dissolve. Not because you failed at life, not because something went wrong, but because you succeeded in reaching the edge of what that identity could carry you toward. The container has become too small, and now something deeper, something more authentic, is demanding to emerge. This is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough that wears the mask of loss. Ego death does not announce itself with dramatic events or clear warnings. It arrives through subtle signals that only the person experiencing them can truly feel. From the outside, your life might look perfectly normal, but inside everything is shifting. You may notice that things which once defined you no longer bring the same sense of stability. A job title that once made you proud now feels strangely meaningless. A relationship that once felt essential now feels like it belongs to someone else's life. Achievements you worked years for suddenly seem hollow, as if they were goals set by a person who no longer exists. You find yourself unable to perform in ways that once came naturally. Small talk becomes exhausting. Social masks feel unbearably heavy. You cannot summon enthusiasm for things that used to excite you, and no amount of forcing changes this. It is not laziness. It is not depression in the clinical sense. It is something deeper, a fundamental disengagement from patterns that no longer fit. Friends and family notice something is different. They say you seem distant, quieter, harder to reach. They worry about you. They want the old you back. They offer advice about snapping out of it, about trying harder to be engaged and present. They cannot understand why their suggestions feel so irrelevant to what you are actually experiencing. But here is what they cannot understand. The old you is not coming back, not because you are choosing to be difficult, but because the old you has completed its purpose. That version served you for a time, carried you through certain stages of development, but it has reached the end of its natural lifespan. No amount of effort or willpower can resurrect something that has genuinely died. A woman named Eleanor once shared that for 3 months, she felt like she was watching her own life from behind glass. She went through the motions, smiled at the right moments, said the expected things, but inside, there was only silence, a vast quiet where her sense of self used to be. She thought something was terribly wrong with her. She visited doctors, tried new routines, forced herself into activities that once brought joy. Nothing worked. The emptiness remained. She began to fear she was losing her mind. Only when she stopped fighting and allowed herself to simply be in that emptiness did she realize what was happening. She was not losing her mind. She was losing a version of herself that had become too small. The silence was not emptiness in the sense of absence. It was space. Space for something new to grow. Space that had to be cleared before the next version of herself could emerge. If you recognize yourself in these words, take a breath. You are not broken. You are in transition. And transitions, by their very nature, require something to end before something else can begin. Here is the part that no one prepares you for. Ego death does not feel like transformation. It does not feel like growth or spiritual advancement. It feels like annihilation. Like everything stable inside you is crumbling and there is nothing left to hold on to. This is because the ego does not surrender quietly. It fights, it panics, it floods you with fear. It tells you that if it dies, you die, that there is nothing beyond its boundaries, that the emptiness you feel is proof of your failure. But this is the ego's final lie, its last desperate attempt to maintain control. Jung understood this intimately because he lived through it himself. Between 1913 and 1919, Jung went through what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. During this period, he experienced visions and heard inner voices. His dreams became so intense they felt more real than waking life. He felt himself being pulled into psychological territory that terrified him. His colleagues believed he was having a psychotic break. His family worried he might never return to normal. Jung himself was uncertain whether he was going insane. Everything he had built, his reputation, his professional standing, his sense of himself as a rational scientist, all of it was dissolving. But instead of medicating these experiences away or fleeing back into conventional life, Jung made a radical choice. He decided to treat his own psyche as a laboratory. He deliberately engaged with the contents emerging from his unconscious rather than suppressing them. He had dialogues with inner figures that appeared in his visions. He drew mandalas to give form to psychological states that had no words. He allowed himself to experience what conventional psychology would have labeled pathological. This period nearly destroyed Jung, but it also transformed him into the psychologist who would change our understanding of the human mind. What emerged from those years of darkness was the foundation of analytical psychology, the concepts of archetypes, the collective unconscious, individuation, the shadow. All of this came from Jung's willingness to go through his own ego death consciously. He wrote in the Red Book that the years when he was pursuing his inner images were the most important in his life. In them, everything essential was decided. The destruction you feel is not meaningless. It is the necessary clearing that precedes renewal. You cannot build a new house while still clinging to the walls of the old one. Something must fall for something greater to rise. For those who need more than philosophy, science offers a fascinating window into what happens in the brain during ego death. Your sense of self is not housed in a single location. It is maintained by a network of brain regions working together, particularly what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This network activates when you engage in self-referential thinking. When you think about who you are, recall memories about your past, imagine your future, or reflect on your place in the world. The default mode network maintains your narrative identity, the story of who you are. It takes scattered experiences and weaves them into a coherent sense of self that persists over time. During experiences of ego dissolution, research shows that activity in the default mode network significantly decreases. The rigid boundaries that normally separate self from world begin to soften. The brain's usual patterns of self-referential thinking quiet down, creating space for new connections to form. This is why ego death feels so disorienting. The prefrontal cortex, which maintains your narrative identity, temporarily loses its grip. Meanwhile, the limbic system, your emotional center, may become more active, flooding you with feelings that seem to come from nowhere. Old memories surface, buried emotions emerge. The neat categories you use to organize your experience start to blur and dissolve. But here is the remarkable part. Studies on neuroplasticity show that these periods of identity disruption are often followed by significant neural reorganization. The brain, freed from its old patterns, begins forming new pathways. Connections that were impossible when the old structure was rigidly in place suddenly become available. What feels like collapse is actually the brain rewiring itself for a more integrated and authentic way of being. Science calls this cognitive restructuring. Jung called it the death and rebirth of the self. Different languages describing the same profound truth. You must come undone before you can come together in a new way. There is a stage of ego death that few people talk about, perhaps because it is the most uncomfortable to describe. It is the space between, the liminal zone where the old self has dissolved, but the new self has not yet fully formed. In this space you feel suspended. You no longer recognize who you were, but you do not yet know who you are becoming. You cannot go backward because there is nothing to go back to, but forward is not yet visible. It is like standing in fog so thick you cannot see your own hands. Jung called this the night sea journey, borrowing imagery from ancient mythology, where the hero is swallowed by darkness and must travel through the belly of the unknown before emerging transformed. It is the story of Jonah in the whale, the descent into the underworld that appears in myths across every culture, the necessary darkness that precedes every genuine rebirth. This void is not punishment. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is incubation. Like a caterpillar inside the cocoon, you are not simply resting or waiting. You are being completely restructured at the most fundamental level. If someone were to open the cocoon midway through, they would not find a caterpillar or a butterfly. They would find formless potential, tissue that has dissolved its previous organization and has not yet achieved its new form. That is what you are right now, formless potential waiting to take new shape. A man named David once described this period as the longest 3 months of his life. He had left a career that no longer fit, ended a relationship that had run its course, and moved to a city where he knew no one. He thought change would bring clarity. He thought external transformation would trigger internal resolution. Instead, it brought emptiness. Every morning he woke up and genuinely did not know who he was. He had no role, no title, no relationship, no one reflecting back an identity he could hold on to. He tried to fill the void. He applied for jobs he did not want. He went on dates with people he felt no connection to. He busied himself with distractions, anything to avoid sitting with the emptiness. But something beautiful happened when he finally stopped running, when he allowed himself to simply be in the void without trying to escape it. David began listening to himself for the first time, not the self that wanted approval, not the self that feared judgment, a deeper self that had always been there, waiting beneath the noise. He did not find this self through effort or strategy. He found it by simply staying present in the void long enough for it to reveal itself. The void was not empty. It was full of potential he could not perceive, while his old ego was still making all the noise. If you are in this space right now, I want you to know that you are not lost. You are in the cocoon. And the cocoon, though dark and confusing, is exactly where you need to be. There is a moment, and it often comes more quietly than you expect, when you realize the fog is beginning to lift, not all at once, not dramatically, but something subtle shifts. You wake up one morning and feel, for the first time in a long time, that you are standing on solid ground, different ground than before, but solid. This is the emergence of what Jung called the self with a capital S, distinct from the ego, which is your constructed identity. The self is your essential nature, the core of who you are beneath all the roles, all the performances, all the conditioning you absorbed from family and culture. Jung believed the self was always present, always whole, always waiting. But it could only emerge fully once the ego stopped blocking the way with its desperate need to control and define. After ego death, people often describe a quality of presence that is difficult to articulate. They feel more grounded, yet more flexible, more certain, yet more humble. They no longer need external validation because they have found an internal anchor that does not depend on circumstances. Here is what specifically changes. You stop performing for acceptance. The exhausting effort of managing how others perceive you simply falls away because you no longer need their perception to feel real. Your sense of self comes from within. You develop a quiet knowing, not arrogance, not certainty about external facts, but clarity about your own nature and values. You sense what aligns with your true self and what does not, and you make choices accordingly. You become less reactive. Things that once triggered you lose their charge because you are no longer defending a fragile, constructed identity. There is nothing to defend, only something to express. You feel connected to something larger than yourself, not in a grandiose way, but in a humble way. You sense that your individual journey is part of a larger pattern, and this brings a peace that circumstances cannot disturb. Jung called this state individuation, the process of becoming the unique individual you were always meant to be. It is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. One of Jung's most profound insights was that psychological wholeness requires the integration of opposites. The ego deals with contradiction by choosing sides. It identifies with certain qualities and rejects their opposites. I am generous, not selfish. I am rational, not emotional. I am strong, not weak. But the self can hold both poles simultaneously. After ego death, you discover that you contain multitudes. You are capable of great kindness and also capable of cruelty. You are capable of courage and also capable of fear. You are capable of wisdom and also capable of foolishness. Rather than denying the parts of yourself that do not fit your preferred self-image, you acknowledge them. You bring them into consciousness. You integrate them into a fuller, more complex, more authentic sense of who you are. This integration does not make you a worse person. It makes you a more complete person. When you acknowledge your capacity for selfishness, you can make conscious choices about when self-interest is appropriate. When you acknowledge your capacity for anger, you can channel that energy constructively. When you acknowledge your vulnerability, you can accept support from others. Jung called this the union of opposites, and he considered it essential to psychological maturity. The person who has integrated their opposites is no longer at war with themselves. They can face the full spectrum of human experience, the ecstasy and the agony, without fragmenting or dissociating. This is the gift that ego death delivers to those who pass through it consciously. Not perfection, not invulnerability, but wholeness. The capacity to be fully present to your own life in all its complexity. I want to return to something I said at the very beginning. You are not seeing this video by accident. Jung believed deeply in synchronicity, the principle that meaningful coincidences occur when inner readiness meets outer opportunity. When the unconscious is ready to communicate something important, life arranges itself to deliver the message. The book falls open to the relevant page. The conversation turns to the exact topic you needed to hear. The video appears in your feed at the precise moment you are prepared to receive it. The fact that this title caught your attention, that these words resonate with something you could not quite name, that you have stayed until this moment. These are not random events. They are signals, gentle confirmations that you are exactly where you need to be in your journey. Your old self has already died. You may have known this for some time without having words for it, or you may be realizing it only now, as these concepts provide a framework for experiences that previously felt chaotic and meaningless. Either way, the transition has begun, and you cannot undo it. You cannot return to who you were, because who you were has completed its journey. That version of you served its purpose, carried you to this threshold, and now it is time to let it rest. This is not loss. This is graduation. This is the psyche moving you forward into a version of yourself you have not yet fully met, but who has been waiting for you all along. In the comments, I invite you to write one word, just one. The word that describes who you feel yourself becoming. Do not overthink it. Let your intuition speak first, whether it is free or quiet or true or unknown, or something entirely your own. Write it down, because naming what is emerging is one of the most powerful ways to welcome it into being. If this video helped you understand your experience in a new way, share it with someone you sense is going through their own death and rebirth, someone struggling to understand why everything feels like it is falling apart. Send them this message. What feels like ending is actually beginning. What looks like destruction is actually creation. And who you are becoming is worth every moment of who you had to release. Your old self has died. Honor it. Thank it. Let it go. And then turn toward the life that is waiting for you on the other side. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next chapter.